C.S. Lewis is a guy that still regularly probably speaks to my soul. He's got so many great works, whether it's Chronicles of Narnia, some of his Christian writings. And one of these statements he has is this quote, if I find within myself a desire in which no experience in the world can satisfy, then the most logical conclusion is that I was made for another world. And I think that embodies so much of life for everyone. We all desire to have some level of purpose. There's a reason why you keep on living in some ways, right? And people struggle to find that purpose, and we all struggle with our own things. And my encouragement to somebody who's like, I'm just curious. Maybe I don't have a faith. Maybe I want to have a faith. Maybe I don't want to have a faith. Would be if spirituality, if Christianity is true, that it's worth investigating. It's worth seriously investigating, because the claim of Christianity is that God himself became a man to reconcile men and women to himself, that they would know him, that they would live for him, have a purpose, and that they would have him forever, enjoying him forever.
Welcome, modern day mystics, fellow truth seekers, James and Justin back again. And today we have another special guest with us. We have Christian Barrett from Emet Ministries. Now, his channel is all focused on helping disciples become disciplers. So this will be our first Protestant guest on the show. So I think we're going to learn a little bit more about Christianity today. Ministries. It'll be interesting. I feel like it's been a while. It's been some time. We're about due to speak to a Christian in the field of ministry and see how the gospel seems in 2025. With the modern issues. See what the take is. All right. Well, we won't keep you guys waiting. Let's get into it. All right, Christian. Thank you so much for joining us on the show today. This is great to have you. Maybe a great place to kick things off would be with maybe letting our audience know a little bit about who you are and what Emet Ministries is all about.
Yeah, my name is Christian Barrett, as you said. I'm a pastor. I also work for Emet Ministries, and Emet Ministries is primarily focused on really, we kind of have this tag of helping disciples become disciplers, and that's a kind of a loaded idea, but to really unpack it, with this understanding of our goal is to help Christians grow in their Christian walk. And so we want to help Christians understand why they're Christians in particular. We want to help them understand the call that's been given to their lives by Jesus Christ. And so we do that through a handful of different ways. YouTube's one of those ways. We provide resources online on our website for them to use in small group settings, reading material, things like that. And of course, just reading recommendations in general. I'm a disciple of so many different people. I've learned from so many different people. And it would be such a shame if I was like, hey, just listen to what I have to say. And so a big part of what I do, I feel like, is just telling people to go read something or someone else, because there are some people that have come before me that I just stand on their shoulders. And I think that's most of just civilization, right? We stand on the shoulders of those that have come before us. And we need to understand that. We need to have a better understanding of that. And so a large part of what I do is helping people just grow deeper in their understanding of the Christian faith in those ways.
Great. Well, one of the things we like to do is we have like a deep passion for hearing about people's spiritual journeys and how they came to the place in their life with whatever connection they have to God or spirit. And I'm sure as a Christian, there's a story in here somewhere about how you came, to where you are today and your belief structure and all that. So maybe you could tell us a little bit about how you became a Christian, why you chose Christianity.
Yeah, that's a good question. I grew up so I'm in Indiana. We're kind of still in this tip of the Bible Belt. I'm in southern part of the state. And so a lot of people in this region probably have very similar stories to mine in some ways. They grew up in a household where maybe they went to church for Christmas and Easter. They heard stories about Jesus as a child. That was a lot of my childhood. But by the time I was in high school, really things kind of just went away from anything to do with religion or spirituality whatsoever. Sports were that was the new religion in our household. That was across the board for everybody involved. And, my mom was pretty faithful in going to the church throughout that time. And when I went to college is when things kind of began to change for me, because I went from this place of maybe there is a God and that God would be the Christian God, because, obviously just kind of being contextually in the States, you're not, I know very few people who grew up in a nominal Christian home who are like getting to college and like, well, maybe the God that exists is the Muslim God. I've yet to meet those individuals, but I had that kind of idea, and I was confronted by some people on campus when I was in university who were Christians, who were pretty faithful, who about sharing their faith and living out their faith, and I hated it. I was like, I don't want whatever they have. Whatever they have, I don't think is true. And so I actually went away. Probably had a story similar to some who would say they walked away from anything. I wouldn't have even necessarily said I was a Christian at all. And so became super fascinated with materialism. Would have said I was an atheist throughout much of my early college career. Focused a lot on philosophers like Nietzsche and Bertrand Russell. I love Bertrand Russell. Still love Bertrand Russell. I think he's one of the most brilliant thinkers of the 20th century. I think that people should read him because he has much to provide in just thinking about the world and the society that we live in, and
That's a guy that wrote a book called Why I'm Not a Christian.
he did, and it's a great book, and I think that every Christian should read it because it will help you understand why you are a Christian and make you ask the question, well, why would I maybe not be one? And so I got fascinated with those types of philosophers who were, really challenging Christianity. And it was is through some different means as I was in college, that I had this kind of moment where I was experiencing lots of things in life, struggling with, depression, struggling with anxiety, wanting to fit in, those types of things. I was doing lots of different things that many college students do, right? Partying, looking to live life however I could and be happy, and thought those things would fulfill me. And it was in that I really began to ask this question of, if this is everything, like if it's just material, then this is like really pointless. And I kind of had this like come to theism moment where I looked up at the night sky and was like, if there's something more out there, I have to find it. Because I can't keep living this way. If I keep living this way, it's going to end up in a couple different places. I was either going to end up dead or I was going to end up in jail. I didn't want to go to either one of those places, and so I had to figure something else out. Because I was just like, if materialism, the thing that made the most sense because of materialism was hedonism, and that was me. And I was like, I'm just going to be a hedonist, and I'm going to live for my pleasures. And so that kind of began my journey of like thinking seriously about what type of God there be. And so, and of course, like coming from a Christian background, I was predisposed to Christianity. And so I had Christian friends who shared the gospel with me, who shared things about the Christian faith with me, invited me to church. But I also was in an interesting context. My roommates, my freshman year of university were Muslim. And so I'd also been exposed pretty early on to faithful, devout Muslims. And so I had this like pretty like broad view of religion just early on in college, which led me to going, okay, I can't just jump into one because I think it might be right. And so I began to ask those types of questions of which one is true. And so, started doing some your basic things. And I wish I could go like, oh, it was this like boom, obvious fact here that kind of led me to go, Christianity is true over all the other religions. And at that time, it wasn't necessarily anything other than the fact that I had an experience of the Christian God. And I remember being with some friends who shared the gospel with me and thinking, wow, that seems to be, if there was a God, the God who loves people, the God who loves them enough to come and save them and rescue them, would be the God that I would want to serve and worship and would be worthy of giving my life to. I didn't in that moment. And it was a few months later that I ended up actually doing that. And it was kind of a by myself moment of, oh, wow. I do think that the things that make the most sense of the world, the pain and the suffering that I see in the world, the longing for a purpose in life, all of that lines up the most with what I see in the Christian scriptures more than I do see in any of the other texts, religious texts that I'd been exposed to. And that was kind of my like trajectory towards Christianity.
I was just thinking about Christianity within culture, like Christianity within a church. There must be a lot of sort of younger Christians that are really grateful to have somebody come along and, like you said at the beginning, like explain to them why they've chosen this in more detail. Like when I was a young Christian, I feel like every now and then I could use something like that. And there was stuff like that, but that could be a great comfort to a young Christian in a world that's throwing all kinds of ideas out there. You know, the world's becoming more integrated. We're being bombarded with all sorts of philosophies and ideas. For somebody to come along and kind of bolster your faith and help you understand, I could see that being huge, very important. It's kind of an odd question. I was just thinking about Christianity on a desert island, you know, because like we don't do much debating on this channel, and you know, debating can be really interesting, can be really entertaining. I just find it ultimately sort of unfruitful, like debating, right? But because part of the reason for that is oftentimes debates devolve into like it's a competition of sorts. So if the truth, like some kind of like, if I can lay something out and by omission, like everybody does this. Anybody, like I've seen Christians do this, you know, sorts of people do it. It's like, do you admit this? Yes, I admit this. Do you admit this? Then ipso facto this. You know what I mean?
Oh yeah.
That sort of persuasion type thing. And then when that fails, sometimes people will literally try to get the approval of like an audience. Like, you know, what kind of it? They'll nitpick something somebody said off color.
Oh
I'm
yeah.
not interested in that. I'm interested in the truest, most earnest, most raw, most authentic, honest thing I can get to, and it is a tall order. It's a tall order in any society.
Mm.
But I'm thinking about Christianity on a desert island. I'm thinking about what kind of Christian would I be if there was no people.
Mm.
You know what I mean? What kind of Christian would I be if it was really just me and God? And sometimes it feels like that with people around. It still feels like you're on a desert island with just you and God. But I'm
Yeah.
saying, I think thought experiments like that, they yield something because it's, you know, think about some of the things Jesus said, you know, especially to individuals. Like as you were talking, I thought about when he encountered the rich man, and he didn't say to that rich guy, you know, all right, do you confess with your mouth right now that I'm the Lord? Okay, good. Do you confess that you're a sinner and you need my savior? Okay. That's not what the prescription he gave that guy. His prescription for that specific guy was sell all your stuff and come follow me. And he couldn't do it, you know? And I don't think Christ would say that to everybody. I don't think he would go up to just anybody and say, you got to sell all your stuff and come follow me. For some reason, that was the rich guy's sort of, his like, what do you call it? Math formula for salvation, it seemed like. So in this talk, I'm wondering if you could talk about that sort of thing, where Jesus says something that seems context specific. You know, maybe even something regarding the way Jesus spoke about the kingdom of heaven, like it being within us and at hand, and you won't be able to say, "Hey, there it is," or "There it's at," and you know, it's supposed to dwell within us. That's the sort of stuff. Because you asked me what I was thinking about. That's where my head's at, and based on everything I just threw at you, what kind of response do you think you feel like giving right now?
Yeah. I love the thought of what does Christianity look like on a desert island?
Yeah, it's weird, right? What does any
Yeah.
religion look like on a desert island?
Yeah. And you know, the early Christians, they really wrestled with a lot. They wrestled with where do we actually fit in culture? What the you know, you bring up the question, the idea of the kingdom of God is at hand. Here's the kingdom of heaven, it's now within you. And the early Christians wrestled with this idea of, well, the kingdom of heaven is within us. What is our role within society? We're to be in the world. Jesus prays that we would be in the world, but not of the world. And so you have this group of early Christians that become monastics who become the desert monks, we call them, and they wander off into the desert, and many of
Yeah,
them just stayed there their entire lives. And
yeah,
there's some of them that they became so isolated that they didn't even see the other desert monks, that they lived in caves by themselves. Their entire religious and Christian experience was them and God, and maybe some version of the scriptures. Maybe they would have had the Old Testament, or maybe even full parts of the New Testament. But there were some individuals who there was these, and they called them pillars, but individuals who would go and they would spend like decades living on a pillar. And there were women who would come and they would bring them food and water, and that was their only human interaction, was the people that would bring them food and water, and they'd pull it up on a rope and they would eat it. And I just think about that, and it's like,
Huh.
you know, in the Christian perspective in the scriptures, Paul talks about the flesh being the thing that ultimately keeps us from knowing God more. We sin, and that robs us of communion with God, and sin in general separates us from God. The desires of the flesh are what keep us from God. But we are human, and we have human experiences, which is why I don't think Jesus does call us to actually go to the desert. We should live in communion with one another and all those things, the physical embodiment, and Jesus himself becomes a man to live with people, and all of that's significant. But if we were to be in a desert, if I was by myself, what would my experience of God be? I think it would be in many ways a real understanding of what it means to know the Creator as Father, of this really intimate, oh, you are my all in all. If that's all I
Mm-hmm.
have is
Mm-hmm.
me and the Creator, I think I would have a deeper appreciation for him as the Creator who created me uniquely and created the rest of the world for me to live in and to enjoy, but created me to know him. And I
There's
think
kind of an
that'd
appeal
be
to going
amazing.
into the desert. There's kind of
Right.
like
I
a little
wanted
bit
to
of an
jump in when
appeal.
you said that, like the plan wasn't to be like fully in the desert. I'm like, yeah, I get what you're saying there. But maybe there is a time to go spend some time in the desert. Maybe there's a time, because that literally how Jesus began his ministry was 40 days and
Yeah.
40 nights, and that's how the whole thing started.
Is that what that 40 Days in the Desert movie with Ewan McGregor's about? Those desert monks? I feel like something clicked there. Like, yeah, I guess it makes sense that there would be people that tried to.
Yeah, I think it may be. Yeah. And that's,
Yeah,
and I think that there is like, and there's this idea within Christianity of like that you would do that regularly. You would have this idea of silence and solitude. And
that's
that's like
hard.
yeah, oh yeah. I don't know if you're familiar with William Wilberforce. He's super
Heard the name.
influential in ending the African slave trade. He was a member of the British Parliament. Um, and one of the like final blows for him and coming to the conclusion that the African slave trade was evil was because he would go on these like regular long walks. And he's on one of these long walks and he's with the Creator and he's thinking about one of the Psalms and he's meditating on that. And it just like clicks.
He wrote Amazing Grace, didn't he?
That's John Newton. So he was good friends with
Oh,
John Newton.
oh, okay.
And
Dang.
John Newton was heavily influential. John Newton
Yeah,
was a former slave trader
yeah,
who was like, Wilberforce, you got to end the slave trade.
yeah.
And so, but yeah, silence and solitude. I think that if we all did it, I think it would change our perspective on one another and God.
When I was a kid, I would fantasize about coming back glowing. You know what I mean? That I went off because I was kind of like a weird, pensive, philosophical, even teenager and pre-teenager, and I would go for walks and come back and hope that I would look into the bushes and there'd be something glowing in there, and I'd come back and. You know what I mean? Like Moses or
Yeah.
something when I was a kid. But I didn't do anything like go, into utter isolation for 40 days, man. That'll either drive you crazy or
Yeah.
make you see God, or maybe both.
Yeah. Well, you mentioned Moses. You think about most of those that are used by God, whether it's in the Old Testament or New Testament, Jesus has 40 days. They all have these moments where they're in the wilderness and they're kind of by themselves. Moses is in the wilderness
Yeah,
and he sees the burning bush
yeah,
and he finds God and everything changes. He has a paradigm shift. And it's this kind of moment. It's like, whoa, I think that silence and solitude in the wilderness,
yeah,
those are paradigm shifts for us.
yeah, yeah, yeah. So where do we go from here?
Well, we're talking about supernatural experiences here. So one thing we always ask our guests, I'm always curious, like because some people have wild stories, some people don't have any stories, and I'm okay with that because I'm one of those people. But I'm curious, like since you have been a Christian, like is as much as you're comfortable sharing, have you had any like supernatural experiences while being a Christian? Like, is there a moment in your life you're gonna be like, I was touched by God, or that was
Mhm.
like something that you can share if you got it?
Yeah. You know, there's been times where I've seen moments of healing. I've seen those types of things, and those are amazing. But there's been these moments too where I've had, and they're far and few between. I wouldn't say I less than five probably in my life where in prayer I mean in prayer particularly with a handful of guys that I'm really close with and just sensing the presence of God and knowing that we're in the presence of the Creator and and it's funny because when we think about prayer, sometimes we just say words and we're saying words, and it's always in those moments where it's been like this just presence is now there that we don't say anything, and
Isn't
there's
that like
kind of
the
this
opposite of the 40
silence.
days in the desert where two or more are gathered there I will be? You know that
Yeah.
Yeah,
verse? It's
yeah,
like, but that's the opposite of being alone in the desert. You know what
yeah,
I mean?
yeah,
So obviously there's a premium on both on
yeah,
solitude time and fellowship time, right?
yeah. And with these guys, just silently, all of a sudden praying, and then all of a sudden we are touching the divine. We are touching the holy. One of the guys I do ministry with says, I hope that when I die, it's a small step into heaven because of wanting to live with such intimacy with God now. And those are little moments that
Lucky guy
having
to be able to say
now.
that.
And you think about Enoch in Genesis is a guy who goes on this walk with the Lord, and the Lord just takes him. And I have no idea what that looks like. It's kind of this like it's just kind of there, and we're just like, what do you do with that in some ways? But it's like I want to go on walks with the Lord and know Him. And so I've had a couple of moments like that where it's just like He's here, we're in His presence, and there's this understanding like. Yes, I know I'm in his presence, but feeling that presence and the comfort and the peace that comes with that, there's really nothing like it. There's nothing that I could ever do to sort of describe probably what it's like to be in the presence of the Holy God with those guys in those moments. And this is, I have two children. Um, you know, there's something special about holding your children when they're born that is somewhere near that spiritual aspect of this reality that these are created individuals and life has come and they are alive and there's an amazing part of that I don't know if everyone has that experience, if that's just been something that I've experienced, but it's been pretty amazing.
The through string of that of being with your Christian brethren and with your children as they're being born uh, seems to be a profound connection. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
Because if you're with other like faith people, or what greater connection could there possibly be than seeing your child emerge?
Yeah,
And it's a common thing. Guys get overwhelmed, and even the most stoic guy will sometimes get a little weepy
yeah,
because I think it has to do partly in terms of what we're talking about with like some kind of deep connection like you don't usually get. It's not connection that you have talking to the bank teller. You're like
yeah.
locked in, connected. Your fates are together on that. I did want to say something. Uh, oh, as you were talking there, and it was interesting that one character that you mentioned that had said, "I hope it's a small step from here to heaven." I feel like that's a sign of religious practice or spiritual practice going right, and I risk sounding a little morbid here, but the idea of, look, I like life. Even the Bible, I'm pretty sure, says like don't harm yourself. Like that's not what I'm getting at. I like life and I'm content and I'm pleased with my relationship with the divine, but at the same time it's fine if something were to happen and I pass on. You guys, we all know it's going to be okay. I enjoyed this. I got what I was. The life was a blessing. I feel like that's a hallmark of something. That's an appealing aspect of it. Not I hate
Yeah.
this. We're here to suffer. You know what I mean?
Yeah, 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 definitely. It's Paul makes the comment in his letter to the Philippians. He says, "To live is Christ, to die is gain."
Yeah.
And it's this like baseline understanding, like there's real joy in living. Like it's
Yes.
good to
It's
live.
not an invitation to die. It's saying,
Yeah.
look at how free I am. I can
Yeah.
die or live. You know what I mean? You don't need to worry. I think that's a sign of like a healthy religion to some degree. It's up for time. I think all the things that we potentially discuss in this are up for moments of deep introspection with God in solitude too. Like, hey God, this has been like, I feel weird about this, you know what I mean? And then going inward and see what happens. I think that that's okay too, but
Yeah. Well, when I reached out to you, you were asking me about maybe topics, things that we could talk about. And the first thing that kind of came to my mind was kind of like the relevancy of Christianity in our modern day and age. In a world that is so complex and yet seems to be almost shrinking with the connection of social media and tech and the rise of AI, and like the governments are shifting and there's like wars popping up, and we're living in a really strange time right now.
Aliens maybe.
Aliens.
Maybe.
How does Christianity fit into this pie?
Yeah. It's such a good question. And I think the more I think about it, a big part of what I do is I work with young adults, particularly college students. And so many of them ask kind of that question: what is the point of Christianity to my life and culture and the world right now? And I think the thing I go back to time and time again is that Christianity offers the best answers to the questions that are kind of being raised because of all of that, whether it's wars or the interconnectedness of the age, or just the hardship of life, the reality that, people you love die, people you love get cancer, you're going to lose your job, whatever it may be. The Christian story is one that says, look, you're spot on. Stuff that is horrible is happening. And so that fits into this understanding that there's a ruin that has taken place, that there's a fall that's taken place. And the longing that you have for that to be restored and the bad stuff to go away, that fits still within this Christian desire and meta narrative across the scriptures for there to be good news to come. And the good news that's found in the scriptures is that it has come, and that's found in Jesus Christ, who comes and he reconciles creation to himself by dying, being raised from the grave. And I think that Christianity just offers answers to that. It offers a hope in the midst of that. And I think a lot about like just the influence of like I want people to be Christians, right? I'm a Christian and I want people to be Christians. But I also want people to understand the value of Christianity just culturally. Like I think that you've benefited, whoever you are, from growing up in a post-Christian world, a Western world. Like that's been a benefit to you, whether that's because of education or finances. The world is a better place because Christians paved a way for it in the 16th, 17th century, particularly Protestant Christianity in the 16th, 17th century in Western Europe. Much of Eastern Europe looks different today because it did not have some of the benefits that the West had because of Protestantism. And I think that in and of itself speaks to at least the cultural benefits of Christianity, not necessarily that doesn't mean it's true. Like there are lots of things that have cultural benefits, but I think it's worth at least investigating and going, there's something to Christianity there.
Mm-hmm. Fair point. I feel like, dare I bring it up, that's a little bit of some of the things Jordan Peterson talks about is like we can't just throw this out. Damn it, it's super important. You know what I mean? I'm willing to acknowledge anything. I'm willing to be open to any kind of interpretation of things. I have a kind of an interesting tidbit about this. Back when because we kind of like we don't really describe ourselves as Christians anymore.
No,
we don't. But when I was a kid, I grew up in a Christian home and was raised going to church, and my parents were Christian and are Christian, and my in-laws are Christian, around it a lot. But as a practicing Christian, one of the verses that kind of the hardest one for me was "Be still and know that I'm God." I could get behind so many different things and rationalize it, but when it came to be still and know that God was God, that was like maybe the most mystical of things. Like, what am I doing here? I gotta go be by myself and know that I am God. What does this mean? And then eventually, when I kind of moved away from Christianity and went and started exploring Eastern mysticism and other religions, it was like, be still and know God's God. You know what I mean? It was like, go be still and meditate and understand this fact. I was just curious, as like somebody right in it, right, as a Christian, convicted, earnest about their belief. What does this verse mean to you? How does it play out? Yeah, could you just speak about it?
Yeah, that's a good question. You know, I being a father has brought honestly so much perspective to the scriptures and what it means to be a Christian in some ways. And I was thinking about this verse this summer with some college students, and we were spending some time in Florida, and my daughter was really struggling with being in a hotel. And there was one night that she was just really upset. And, she's in a pack and play. And so the pack and plays are probably not the most comfortable thing in the world. And so she's very, very much scared. And I go in and I just sit there and I say, Hayden, I'm here. I love you. And it's going to be okay. Will you close your eyes? And she closes her eyes. I go, I'm here. I love you. And it's going to be okay. And she begins to stop, like, calm down. And I kind of say that a couple of times. And I think in that moment, maybe I got the first real understanding of what it means to go, be still and know that I'm God. Because she understood, be still, he is my father. He's my dad. He's my daddy. He's going to take care of me. Nothing bad is going to happen to me. He's there. And that's in many ways what that idea gets to my heart out of, like, no matter what the day brings. And this is, I think this is what I love about the Christian scriptures, is that the Christian God never belittles how big or little your problems are. Oh, I got in a car crash. Oh, I got a cancer diagnosis. Oh, I didn't get a good parking spot at the grocery store. Like it doesn't matter the things that give us anxiety or problems. He desires for us to come to him and know that he's God, and to rest in him, and to be in his presence. And I think that it's those things that I get drawn to, where I'm like, I just want to be in his presence and be still and stop trying, because sometimes in life it's just like, I'm just going to do. I'm going to read my Bible more. I'm going to tell more people about Jesus. I'm going to pray more. And sometimes it's like, I just need to sit and be still. And sometimes for me, that's going out and just being outside and listening to the creation and knowing that I have a God who hears my cries when I cry out. And that's what we see in the Psalms as well.
Has your faith or your understanding of God evolved or progressed as from like the first time, like when you just became a Christian, to now? Like, has your understanding of God changed? And if so, how has it changed?
Oh yeah, definitely. I think that if somebody said no to that question, I would be like, let's talk about why it's not. Let's just get into that. And I'm sure people are probably like, no, and it should never change. If you've found the truth, it should never change. But I think that the more we get to know someone, and God's a person, of course our understanding and the relationship is going to change. My relationship with my wife has changed, right? How I know her is different. I think about, you think about like the most precious diamond in the world. You look at it from one side and you go, wow, this diamond is so pure and perfect and amazing. And then you roll it over and you're like, there's another side to it. It's amazing. It's even more amazing than I thought it was. And I think that's what a relationship with God is like. every day is a new rolling over of the diamond and seeing how beautiful and amazing he is. And I always tell people we want to mine the depths and treasures of Christ. And so how has that changed for me? Maybe a kind of answer some of that. I think when I first came to faith, I had this very simple understanding. There's a creator who created me. He saved me, and I'm to worship him. And that's good. That's basic Christianity. Most people, if they have a Christian understanding, that's kind of where they're at. And that's the good news, right? It's a lot of the gospels in that. My understanding and my growth as a Christian has come along this understanding. Not only do I have a creator who made me and who has saved me, but I have a creator who I can commune with, like who I actually can talk to, who I can speak with. I have a creator who has invited me into a communion of other people, not just now, but throughout all of time. And I have a creator who invites me to enjoy him. And I enjoy him through so many different means, whether it's outside with my wife, with my friends, doing my job, eating, all of these different things.
I hope those count as worship. You know
And
what I
they
mean?
do,
Because
right?
that's one thing I say. I say if you want most basic form of worship has got to be enjoying God's creation.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like just a subtle amount of like appreciation. You know what I mean? As you're eating a
Yeah.
whatever you're
And
eating.
Paul says, do whatever you do, do it all to the glory of God. Whether you're eating or drinking, do it all to the
Sure.
glory of God. And that's like, that's enjoying God.
Yeah.
Enjoying the things that God has given is giving God the glory in everything. And so that has been where probably my view and my life has transformed the most over the years in understanding who God is. It's just this deep appreciation that I get to enjoy him and his
Back in the
ways.
day when we were in church, there would be like youth group events and stuff, and sometimes they would have like hilarious skits or comedians and stuff come in. And I was just imagining somebody like for one of those things doing like the worst sermon ever, like go and be frozen, learn nothing, don't change at all on your walk. You know what I mean? Like just
Yeah.
the opposite, just some like snake oil salesman version of it. That's not what you want people to know. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
To highlight.
Yeah.
That the Bible is described as the living word, and this is your walk in faith is a process, right? Like
Yeah.
you're probably gonna be tested and struggle with through your faith. You're called to struggle, right? You're called to wrestle with faith.
Yeah.
I think.
Yeah. And and there's been different life moments too that have revealed the depths of who God is more to me. I love the story of Jacob, where he goes from Jacob to Israel. He wrestles with God, and
Yeah.
his name gets changed. And we're called to wrestle with God. You just said it. And I just want to be a person who wrestles with God.
Mhm.
And I think a lot of that comes from the fact that I like to ask questions. And so, I get to wrestle
Sparring,
with them.
getting
Yeah.
rolling, jujitsu with God.
Well, we talked a bit about your growth there, but as you mentioned some of the stuff in the past there, it got me kind of thinking about some of the early Christian days. And one of the things I think is impressive about Christianity is that it does seem to find a way to adapt itself in its cultural surroundings. It seems kind of flexible that way. Like when I first started going to church, it was all suit and tie hymns. And by the time I left, it was guitars and drums and light shows. It was and not to say, well, I'm not pointing to like what's good or
He's
bad.
doing a
but
synth solo in the spirit.
I'm just saying there seems to be an adaptability within Christianity, but you probably have a better understanding and a take on that. I'd like to hear what you have to say about the church and its ability to be kind of flexible.
Yeah, the church is always contextualized. It's always done that, whether that's in Jerusalem or when Paul leaves and he takes the gospel to Athens. It's always contextualized. Paul goes to Athens, and the first thing he does is he starts quoting the philosophers. And it's like, oh, hold on, Paul, what are you doing? You need to quote the Old Testament first. And it's like, well, I'm with a bunch of Greeks. Why would I do that? They've never read the Old Testament. And I think that we have to understand that today that there is this level of contextualization. Of course, we want some level of tradition and those types of things, but it's like if we expected This is one of the things the church got into a big issue with in the medieval age. They're like, everyone needs to do the church, your traditional church service needs to be in Latin. And it's like that's fine if everybody knows Latin. But you get into Germany where no one speaks Latin, and they're like, "What is going on?" And you're not even allowed to take part in the Lord's Supper. And it's like, "Well, I'm not allowed to take in the Lord's Supper because I don't know what he just said." And it's like now it's an issue because you've not contextualized the gospel, you've not contextualized church, you've not done any of those things. The thing the church has tried to avoid is syncretism, and many people syncretize, right? They say, well, we'll just add this thing from the culture into the core ideas and values of the religion. And much of the Protestant Reformation was actually let's remove all of the things that were brought in as a part of a syncretism, and remember that we're contextualizing at times, but we're never adding to. And that's been a big part of what I think we see with the rise of the contemporary movement that happens like in the 90s, where you go from what you pointed out, like suit and tie, to now my pastor's in a t-shirt and baggy jeans, and they're playing like non-Christian music in the lobby beforehand. Like, what's going on? To like, okay, now we're kind of going back away. This is something that's super fascinating, I think, with Gen Z. Just going to Gen Z briefly, is Gen Z is like much less interested in the pastor who has the baggy jeans and the secular music and the fun like sermon that's like about like, here's your 5 like tips on how to live a healthy life from Jesus. And it's more like, hey, like, what is truth? What is the Bible? Like, is there something worthwhile in that? And if so, how does it actually impact my life?
Hmm.
That's what Gen Z, that's where Gen Z's at. That's what I'm seeing, at least with Gen Z.
Yeah. I think we're seeing that too.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's almost like after the hippie revolution of the 60s, people were like, I'm gonna be Jesus. You know what I mean? And then a bunch of people like, and then by the 80s and 90s, there was like remnants of that, like trying to make Jesus hip, and then but people maintained their faith all the way through that. And now it's almost like Alex P. Keaton or something that are like, let's be serious about life, for Pete's sake. You know what I mean? And serious about what we're doing here in our religion. I understand that. I think it appears in other religions too, this kind of ebb and flow of how the culture is reacting to it. We were talking to a guy that was like essentially a Hindu apologist, but he was agnostic at the same time.
Yeah.
He's agnostic, but he was in defense. He knows a lot about Hinduism. It was the faith of his childhood, and so he would talk about it like that. And I guess to turn that into a question maybe would be, what do you think of the people's rights to believe differently? You know what I mean? Like somebody that comes along and they're kind of doing what you're doing, but for a different faith. We've got a pretty big Muslim audience.
Yeah.
And I want them to know, in case they're watching this, because like I'm enjoying this conversation. This is a pleasant conversation, but it's always like this with our guests. In case you've been watching, you go to our reaction videos to see me fly off the handle and be super judgy and critical. I don't do that with guests. I'm usually try to be civil.
You're being too kind to me.
But back to the question, what do you think about that? Like, keeping in mind that there's probably some Buddhists and Hindus and Muslims and Jews and Jains, who knows, going to see this. What do you think about their beliefs and the conviction they have towards their own respective religions?
Yeah. Well, this goes back to my comment about culture being influenced by particularly the Protestant Reformation. Many scholars, one of the big like claims that Roman Catholics like say about the Protestant Reformation is that the Protestant Reformation allowed atheism to happen. And a part of being a Protestant is that, look, you have the right to believe what you want to believe. In fact, I have no reason to believe that you will believe Christianity is true. If what I believe about the scriptures is true, I have no necessarily reason to go, oh yeah, just because this is true means that you're going to just believe it. Like, there's no necessary reason for that. And the Protestant Reformation paves the way where it's like, now that we live in a world where it paves the way for secularism to rise, because we go, oh, we no longer have a state that is ran by the church, and the idea of separation in church, that's a Christian idea. Christians wanted that. And so I think that anybody has the right to believe what they want to believe. my hope with that is that you would genuinely ask, is what I believe true? That's my genuine desire. That's my desire as a Christian. I hope somebody would go, well, do you do that? Like, are you investigating? Are you reading the Quran? Are you reading maybe the Book of Mormon? Are you studying Hinduism or Jainism or whatever it may be? And I think that if I were to say, well, no, I'm not just Christianity. That's all it is. I think that would be maybe a little hypocritical of myself. But I personally, I love studying other religions. I think other religions are worth investigating because they're all making truth claims. Whatever it is, majority of them are making truth claims, right? Some form of a truth claim. Um, the thing that's significant about Christianity is that Jesus himself says he is the truth, which is like a totally different truth claim than what we see in many of the other religions. But I think everyone has a right to believe what they want to believe. Are you willing to understand why you believe what you believe though? That is my desire. That's my hope for anybody, is that you would go, no, I'm going to find out why I believe what I believe.
It's tough. It's tough because you only get one life, right? And at least as far as I know, and to go all the way with one faith is it like, it's how can you test it against all the other ones? Because it really seems like it takes a whole lifetime. Like you're going through your Christian walk, you're going through your journey, and I know that you've got so much more to learn, you got so much more to grow.
Yeah.
Right? It's like it's really challenging.
Yeah. Well, I mean, a big part of what you guys do is thinking about these questions, right? Well, what do I believe about the world? I'm assuming the reason you're no longer a Christian in some ways, or identify as Christian, is because you've come to a conclusion that there are other beliefs in the world that are worth thinking about, right?
Yeah.
And there's lots in your stories, right? I'm sure, and you don't have to get into those things.
Yeah.
But everybody needs to think about their story. You made the comment, Bertrand Russell, why I'm not a Christian.
Yeah.
I've read it a couple of times about why I'm not a Christian. I think it's worth asking the question, not only why am I not a Christian, why am I a Christian? Why am I not a Muslim? Why am I not this? Why am I not that?
Yeah, for sure. I think that, it's interesting in what I would describe as sort of like kind of a revolution of my belief system. All those years, probably over 10 years ago now. Part of it was kind of getting like a taste for, I guess, what you could describe as something like freedom to not even be repressed in the presence of God. Meaning I can go to God and say, like, I don't believe in you today. And a weird thing happened because I'd be talking to Christians afterwards and I'd say, for me, it wasn't till like I was ready to completely profane the Bible, like do the worst thing you can imagine, that something opened up for an appreciation to some of the words Christ actually had to say. Like, I still like the character of Christ. I like how hyperbolic he seems at sometimes. Like, who goes around saying, like, I'm the truth? If you're looking at me, you're looking at the Father. Or who comes and says, if your hand causes you to offend you, cut it off. Like, a lot of the things Christ says, and sometimes if it's a safe space and I see that things aren't hostile, these are the type of verses I'll bring up to Christians and be like, what's going on here? Like, I am game, even for what I'm at, but needing to be, I personally have too much of a taste of freedom to even want to be relegated to one thing. Like, because sometimes you'll encounter Christians like, I need you to confess the name of Jesus right now. They're like saying that to you. You can see that they've got concern in their heart and all this. And it's like, I won't do it. And for all I know, maybe I'm closer with Christ than even you are. I don't know. Like, not you. I'm just saying, like, I don't have a problem with my relationship with Christ, but I do have a problem with being boxed in any way. I don't think it doesn't feel good to me to consider God in this way. That's just a personal sort of aside. I forget how we got onto this, but I think it was when you were mentioning that, well, you must have in your walk questioned these things. Yeah, a lot of questioning went on, but in that questioning, certain aspects of the Bible and certain aspects of Jesus became more appealing. Even as a non-Christian, I'm like, Jesus was he was going into the temple and flipping the tables over and accusing the Pharisees, and look at the people he spent his time with, and look at the things he said. I came to save the broken, and I came to save the sinners. You know what I mean? There's a lot of things in those red letters that Christ said that oftentimes, as a non-confessing Christian, like as somebody that's not a Christian, I sometimes feel like saying, well, let's just talk about Jesus. You know, isn't he the cornerstone of the whole thing? Isn't he the main thing? Let's stick to the red letters for a while. Because we could get lost in Numbers. We could get lost in Kings or something like that, or some description of how to build the tabernacle. But you know, like, but Jesus's words they're true. They can be true for anybody. You know what I mean? There's a lot to that, you know? What does that mean? That's so mysterious. The kingdom's within us. You know, I want that. I would say of course I want the kingdom within me. And of course I would want to die to self. This selfish, paranoid, scared self. Of course I would want to die to self and let Christ live through me instead. You know what I mean? I'm not interested in justice. I'm interested in that. You know? All this personal stuff. And I think when you're with your brothers and stuff like that, I don't want to speak for you, but when a Christian tells me that they get so much out of the unity with their brethren and they're not so far gone that they can't feel moved by the, you know, birth of their children and stuff like that. It is touching the divine. It's touching in something deep, and I think it's in there, you know, that godly stuff, as opposed to kind of somebody that's the opposite, that cheesy preacher that comes up and says, like, you know, over heavy-handed, and, you know, all of a sudden people are sort of down because they become too legalistic. Jesus told people would complain. They would say, look, this guy's doing something on the Sabbath. And he would say, the Sabbath was made for man, not man for the Sabbath. That's a pretty likable character to me. Somebody willing to say, you don't need to be legally buried. You're here to be free.
Yeah.
You know, in answer to the question, that's what part of what happened with me. Just a taste for freedom.
Yeah.
A taste to be any kind of thing if it's free.
Yeah. Yeah. And, you know, this is one of the things that I think this is important for anybody. I always challenge people, Christians, non-Christians, you know, what's your friend group look like? You know, who are your friends? I have a close friend who is not a Christian, and we have some of like my favorite conversations like today are with him. And I would consider him one of my closest friends. And, you know, I have friends who are Muslims, and, you know, we disagree on who Isa is, and we disagree like really, really seriously about it. Like it's vehement disagreement, but we're still friends. Like we at the end of the day, we could go, all right, let's go eat now, right?
Yeah.
And you know, and that's I think there is a level of like common grace that comes from the world, and that we need to have with one another in that. And I just think some of it's this, you know, you said it, we only live once. This understanding of we're on a journey. I'm on a journey with people. I'm journeying, and I want to. I believe I have the truth, right? I'm not looking to say that I'm, you know, so wise that I've come to that. I think that God has changed my life. I've had experiences of God that have changed my life. But like, I want people to know what I've tasted. You know, Jesus says, you know, come and taste and see. You know, I think about the woman at the well, and she's running away after Jesus has told her everything she's ever, like, I mean, it's the most embarrassing moment of anyone's life. And she's like running into the city. Come and let me tell you of the one who's told me everything I've ever done. And it's like, that's me. I want you to come and meet the one who knows every gross detail about my life, yet says he still fully loves me. And that's me. And I would love to hear your story along the way. And you know, people care about what you have to say when they know you care. And so I'm just like, I hate when people are like, hey, how are you doing? And then they get like 30 seconds and they're like, oh, that's cool. Now, can we talk about Jesus? And it's like, I want to talk about Jesus. I love when people talk about Jesus, but you have to like care for people more than 30 seconds sometimes before you get to let's talk about Jesus.
Well, imagine if Jesus took root in your heart and was literally like shining out of your eyeballs. You might not have to say anything. You know what I mean? If the Holy, like, it sounds weird, but hey, man, if you indulge me for a sec, that's what's interesting to me, is the idea of the Holy Spirit being manifest, real, to the point where, you know, what's going to get in the way of God's wonders? You know what I mean? You might not have to say anything. You might encounter another Christian that's changed forever. Your silence, you know, Christ residing within you, that kingdom reflected back, may be powerful. You know what I'm saying? Does it make any sense?
Hear what you're saying.
Um,
One of the most, to make a little bit of a shift here, one of the most popular subjects in Christianity, at least when I was growing up, was end times and eschatology. And seeing as we're living in this strange day and age that we're in, do you have any, I don't know, I don't even know if you're like a dispensationalist, a post-millennial, I don't know what you believe, but in terms of the Bible, Christianity, and where we're at in history right now, what do you have to say about the end times?
Yeah. I saw like on Twitter a couple of days ago, some prophet he prophesied that the world's ending on, I think, September 25th. So get ready, get ready.
Yeah.
It's happening. Jesus is coming back, and there's no you don't want to miss the rapture. You don't want to miss that. You'll be here for the tribulation. I'm not a dispensationalist. I'm not a premillennial. I'm an amillennialist. I think that makes the most sense of reading the text. I think that what we see in a lot of the Book of Revelation is like
Is there a
already
rapture?
happened.
Is there a rapture coming?
Yeah, I think that the word rapture just means gathering if I'm reading it right in the Greek. And so I think, yeah, God's going to gather his people at the end of time all at once, not like I'm not going to just disappear and my clothes are going to be here. But I think that God's
That
people
was a
will
real
be.
fear growing up.
Oh,
Every
yeah.
now and then, if
Oh,
the
I
house was
believe
empty
it.
when I came upstairs, I'd be like, did the rapture happen?
Oh, yeah.
What's going on?
Did I miss it? Yeah, and I'm so thankful I didn't grow up with that fear. But I think I've read some of the like Left Behind books.
Yeah.
People really base a lot of their like theology off of this,
Yep. Oh, yeah.
and I think that does a lot of damage. I think there is some damage that does come from like fear mongering in some ways with that. But I think that we will come to a time where no one knows the hour where the Lord Jesus Christ will return, and every knee will bow, every tongue will confess that He is Lord, and we will see our Creator, and we will rejoice at His return. Everyone will rejoice, and there will be a day of judgment with that. That's associated with that. I don't hold to a post millennial view or a premillennial, post trib or
Yeah.
dispensational position. Yeah,
All right, cool. For those out
much
there,
less exciting.
yeah, yeah, it's less exciting. You don't have
All right,
like
let's talk demons
Yeah,
then.
like when we were kids, we used to watch like John Hagee, and he'd have these giant charts behind him with dragon heads, and he'd be taking everyone point with his pointer, showing everyone exactly how it was going to go down.
And the woman who
It was
rides the
like-
beast.
Yeah. Well, so people like conspiracies. People like salacious things. Like if you did have a good demon story, it would totally be people would be interested. You know what I mean? Or a ghost story or aliens. People like salacious.
That was a question I had. Would it change anything if aliens parked down on the White House front lawn tomorrow? Would anything like that change your faith at all?
If you were just going to leave it at, would it change anything? Yeah, it change everything would change. I think in America for sure, we'd be having a real big conversation. Um, you know, I don't think so. I had this question get asked when I was in seminary, and the professor was like, "Why do you think it would change?" And the guy was like, "I don't, I mean, aliens. Like that sounds kind of crazy. Like think about aliens." He's like, "Well, what do you think an alien would look like?" And he describes, what we think an alien would look like most of the time. And he's like, "Do you think that alien wouldn't be created by God? What do you know about God? He created everything in the world. So is that alien not created by God?" It's like, oh, it kind of still fits into my understanding of who God is. It doesn't change anything I know about the scriptures. It doesn't just because, I don't know what a mineral is on some planet 30,000 galaxies away doesn't mean that God didn't create it. And
What
I
would
think
be
that's the same
weird-
for aliens.
What would be weird is if there were alien evangelists, like they got off the saucer and they were like had some weird shape, and they were like, "You guys need to believe this," and they were handing them out. We were like, "What the heck? No, we've got our own items."
That would be definitely a different conversation, right? And like the intelligent life in general would be just I just think still fits under the paradigm we see in the scriptures of there is a creator who created everything in the universe, and intelligent life is out there, right? Believe in angels, believe in demons. So like I know there's non-human intelligent rational beings. So it doesn't necessarily contradict anything, I think, within the Christian picture. Now, there are some who I do know would be very adamant of like, no, that cannot fit into the Christian perspective. I don't know. Like, I don't believe necessarily aliens are real. Maybe there is. The galaxy or the universe is huge, but I have no idea. But I also
Yeah.
really don't necessarily care in some ways. Like, awesome if they show up, as long as they're friendly, right? I don't want aliens that are showing up to War of the Worlds us, but
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah. Or give us faster microwaves. You know what I
Hope
mean? What does this mean for the bottom line here?
if an alien shows up and they only give us faster microwaves, I'm gonna be super disappointed.
That's their whole religion. They're like telling us to like worship.
How
it.
did you get here?
We have socks, man. Show us the Epstein files. I don't care about the stupid microwave.
That's right.
Yeah.
On a more serious note, for say someone out there who's watching our podcast, they stumble across this and they don't have any faith. They don't believe in God. They're just fascinated. They saw this and like, oh, interesting conversation here. What would you say to the person maybe who's struggling right now to find any belief in anything, any purpose in anything? What would you say to that person?
Mhm. C.S. Lewis is a guy that still regularly probably speaks to my soul. He's got so many great works, whether it's Chronicles of Narnia, some of his Christian writings. And one of these statements he has is this quote, if I find within myself a desire in which no experience in the world can satisfy, then the most logical conclusion is that I was made for another world. And I think that embodies so much of life for everyone. We all desire to have some level of purpose. There's a reason why you keep on living in some ways, right? And people struggle to find that purpose, and we all struggle with our own things. And my encouragement to somebody who's like, I'm just curious. Maybe I don't have a faith. Maybe I want to have a faith. Maybe I don't want to have a faith. Would be if spirituality, if Christianity is true, then it's worth investigating. It's worth seriously investigating because the claim of Christianity is that God himself became a man to reconcile men and women to himself, that they would know him, that they would live for him, have a purpose, and that they would have him forever, enjoying him forever. That's the claim of Christianity in many ways, kind of summed up. And that's a claim worth investigating wherever you're at on your spiritual journey. Atheist, agnostic, Muslim, whether you're Jewish or, a Hindu, I think anybody needs to go, that is worth investigating, especially with the person of Jesus. Everybody's fascinated with Jesus. Everyone has to do something with the person of Jesus of Nazareth. They can say it didn't exist. That's it. That's an option. I think it's a bad scholarly option. I don't think there's any well respected academics that are going out saying that Jesus didn't exist. But you have to do something with Jesus at the end of the day. And if you want to really find a purpose in life, one of those I think comes from looking at Christianity with an open arm and open eyes.
Well said. Very well. Good answer.
All right. Well, do you have anything else you
I
want to add?
don't. I don't. But I've liked this conversation.
What I'll say, Christian, is thank you so much for joining us today. This was awesome having you on the show and spending some time with us. Maybe to close things out, you could, if you have like one overarching message that you want to share with our audience, like I feel you kind of did, but you could just spin off of what you just said, and then maybe let our audience know where they can find you and what you got going on and all that good stuff. We'll let you close it out.
Yeah, thank you guys so much for having me. I've really enjoyed this. I love talking about these things. I think these are the most important conversations anyone could have, and I think not enough people are having them. That is the thing that disappoints me the most. I think about where we're at in an over entertained age is that people aren't having these conversations. So thank you for what you guys do. My message is a simple message. I'm a guy who was saved from the bottom of a pit because of a God who created me, who longed to know me, and despite knowing everything I've done, loved me. And he loved me enough to send his son to die for my sins and to give me everlasting life, not because I've done anything worthwhile, but because I believed in the Lord Jesus Christ. That's it. And because he was raised, I've been raised. And that's my hope in life. My purpose in life is to live for him, to enjoy him, and to proclaim his name and to make his name known. And so you can find more of my stuff, Emet Ministries on YouTube, emetministry.org. I do stuff on there. And then the Fourfold Disciple is the name of the podcast on Spotify and Apple Podcast. Do stuff, just trying to engage culture, trying to engage different religious topics on there, and love talking about and thinking about these types of things.
Beautiful. Great. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks.
Yeah. Thank you.